I'm going to ask a few and then I'll open it up to the audience. Now, if I could sum up what you've all said, and forgive me for being simplistic, but I am a journalist, is that nature's teeth seem to be getting sharper and the target in the form of cities seem to be getting bigger and more vulnerable. And you, I think, mentioned the fact that in Christchurch you've become aware of the need for both development and change from the top and from the bottom. In other words, making both sides aware of the risks and then planning accordingly. How well do you think that is going, not just in your city but across the board? That both sides, top and bottom, meeting to understand what the risk is and to plan accordingly for the future. Here's the mic. Actually, your mic is still on probably. Can you just say? Oh, okay, there we go.
I think that's the $64 million question, because I don't know that before we experienced our disaster that there was any understanding of the degree of top-down and bottom-up that needed to be done. And I think that the earthquake has actually just given us this incredible opportunity and places us, I think, quite well in terms of contributing to world knowledge in this area. So if you think about the fact that over 50% of the world's population now lives in cities that are coastal, that understanding what the climate change will mean and how that will impact on, or how decisions we make today will impact on those cities is pretty fundamental. So I have to say that we are nowhere near understanding the importance of doing it. But I think that the key is that word trust. So until people trust the information that they're given, then they aren't necessarily going to change the way that they behave. And the question is, where do you find that level of trust, and how do you base it on the evidence that our scientists can produce?
Well, on that note, let me hand the microphone straight to Roman. I want to ask you a question about trust, because Roman, you said something in your speech. You said it's a bit like smoking and lung cancer. Yeah. So if that is the relationship between climate change and the disasters that we're seeing, why have politicians, why have agencies not been able to put that message so succinctly, and why are they still being disbelieved? Is it because of the political campaign from the climate change doubters? Is it because of the fact that there just isn't enough evidence around to make the case? What would you do about that?
Yeah, well, there are various factors here. I mean, one is certainly the one you just mentioned. There has been a lot of climate skepticism around, and climate skeptics have been extremely loud and unfortunately successful in some corners of the world. So that has certainly been a huge distraction.
Sorry to interrupt, but why are they so successful if you say the science is clear?
Well, I mean, you can always try to poke holes into something. I mean, look, science isn't mathematics. There is no absolutely rigorous proof. There's always somewhere a hole you can poke into. There's still people who try to prove the quantum mechanics is wrong. So there's something you can try to do about it, and large part of the motivation is probably political and economical. But the flip side of the coin is that it is, and this came out in various presentations, predicting the impact at the local level is very, very hard. So this is not an easy problem. We can't just simply take a model, crank the handle and say, yeah, here is what climate change means for London or for Christchurch or for some other city. And I think scientists haven't been very good at communicating these uncertainties. And I think that was a part of the point I tried to run home is, so from the policy side, one should not hope to get clear predictions. There won't be numbers. There will be uncertainty intervals maybe to be had. And scientists should focus more on providing that sort of information.
Okay, so let me ask Patricia very quickly. Now, he's just said that we scientists have not been very good at communicating the clarity of the message. do politicians shy away from communicating the clarity of the risk message? Because if you say that something dreadful will happen, you're going to have to come up with a solution that you're going to have to finance, you're going to have to support, and it's going to have to yield results.
I think the winning recipe must be that the scientists provide the information, as simple language as possible, not, science that people don't understand. And then it's the role of the politicians, of the leaders then to communicate that message, not the role of the scientists to communicate that message. And to me, it's all about the approach. I will approach the communities with the information gathered by scientists and universities, go to the communities and say, I need your help. This is the information that we've been provided for by the universities, and now we together must find a way to get this information to be understood by our communities, and therefore I need your help. If you say to communities, I need your help, they will much easier buy into the communication strategy that you have with them and then take it forward like that. Otherwise, if we just come in and we warn them and we make them afraid of what might happen in the future, people are not impressed by that.
Aris, let me ask you a question. As far as I understand, the basis, the kind of philosophical basis of microfinance is that you go to people and you say, something bad is probably going to happen at some stage, and if you put a small amount of money into this kitty, we will help you to avoid the worst disaster if you participate in this program. Why can't the same basic transaction, the same basic level of trust be used on the macro level, not just on the micro level?
As a practitioner, the poor are always the one facing this difficulty. I will take the view, that's why we're proposing on harnessing and strengthening the microinsurance program and the microfinance, because they are so vulnerable that we have to prepare for them. Like in our case in the Philippines, we came up with the housing disaster insurance. So if the houses are destroyed, then we pay right away. And our essence of services is that we're able to pay the 135 scheme. Within the day, we will pay if there's a claim. If there are questions, in 3 days, with finality in 5 days. So these are very important cushion, and these are very important safety net. So while politicians and academicians and scientists are busy on debating, we're right there in the field and doing our own work. We were there when Lianne came in. We were the first, one of the first organizations that were able to respond to these clients.
Okay, so Edward, let me ask you a question. Does one need a big event like this to bring the message across, or can one just appeal to people's logic and basic understanding of risk in order to demand more from the communities and indeed from the politicians?
I rather regret it's the first. You actually have to have the incident, and then people come together and deal with it. I mean, the best example I can give, I was talking a little bit about some of the flooding that we had. Well, it wasn't flooding because you were next to a river. You were nowhere, some of the worst flooding was nowhere near a river. It was actually rising groundwater. And to try and explain that to people, that the groundwater is rising, that you are going to get flooded. And I'm sorry, they will not believe you until the water is actually lapping at their door, and then they still don't believe you, and they think it's something else that's happening. And so I'm sorry, I think we have to go through some rather painful processes. The trick, though, and I think this comes back to some of the earlier comments, it's about planning for that, so that when it does happen, that we can move quickly and then deal with, hopefully, what it is that's taken place.
And is it your understanding that we're getting better at the planning as the disasters mount up?
That is my understanding. I certainly think in London we're getting better at it. I mean, the terrible problem, of course, is that you very rarely get the same problem twice. And it's always something different that comes along. But at least there is now beginning to be a better mechanism to get to grip with whatever it is.
Okay, now we're going to open it up to the audience. A question from the audience. Who would like to ask a question? Hands up. Yes, please. Can you just say where you're from, your name, and then tell me who you're going to direct the question at?
I'm Nicola Ranger from Department for International Development in the UK. My question is directed at a colleague from Christchurch. I was wondering, building on that last comment, have you found that the action to build resilience has spread to other cities and towns across New Zealand? So are people learning from your experience and taking up action elsewhere? And are you finding that in your own city, people are responding not just to the earthquake risk, but to a broader range of risks? So, how does that learning expand out, or is it just all focused on earthquake in your own city?
No, I did say it was a teachable moment writ large. Doesn't mean that anyone's teaching anything or anyone's learning anything at the moment. So even though it's 3.5 years down the track, I think that there are the city's been affected in different ways, so that there are people who are still struggling to move on because they still haven't settled their insurance or their earthquake commission payments and settled the rebuild or the repair of their houses. So they're just simply not in a position to engage. I think that the rest of the country, their knowledge of risk rose briefly, but it's just gone back to the same levels that it was before. So in a way, I agree with Sir Edward, because it is just exactly along those lines that people need to be kind of put into that situation. But sometimes people can change the way that they experience or understand risk if they understand who holds the risk. And that's why I talked about shared responsibility being the first step towards resilience, because I think that people have it in their head that if they insure, then they're protected against things happening, when they're only protected against the financial consequences or some elements of the financial consequences. I heard about the business interruption insurance being developed to go with the micro-insurance. An excellent idea. The most effective thing that happened in Christchurch after the earthquakes for businesses was the payment of an immediate subsidy for employees. And that meant that employers could keep their employees on the payroll and not worry about that while they got their businesses back on their feet. That's the sort of learning that I think will help us build resilience. But I think the real debates around climate change and all of those things, the reason that they're so hard is that they never ask the question, who pays? Who carries the risk? Are we talking about transferring the risk or assuming the risk ourselves? And because we transfer the risk, we say it's a government decision or a council decision, we don't actually see that there is a cost. And if we socialise that cost way down the track, then who pays? Another generation. So I think that these are the hard questions that come out of the experience that we've had. So are we building resilience throughout the rest of the country? Not yet, but yeah, I'm going to get my way.
So what you're really saying, Lianne, is that risk preparedness needs something extraordinarily lacking normally in public life, and that is honesty, a lot of honesty.
Well, it is honesty, but it's also being prepared to kind of tell it how it is. Yeah. And that's warts and all. And I'm sorry, but politicians don't like doing this. If you're going to have a natural disaster, for heaven's sake, don't have it in an election year. Yeah. I think it's much better to have it in an off year where people can actually just take their time and sort things out as quickly as they can. And we learnt this lesson from the guy who was the mayor of San Francisco with their disaster, Art Agnos. He came over for a TEDx event. And he said that, that they were confronted with a really hard decision around reinstating the highway, freeway, and he decided against a march of like 21,000 people marched on City Hall, and he decided that he would go with the Citizens Committee recommendation to take the freeway down, and opened up the San Francisco waterfront. And what a great decision that was. It cost him his seat, but it saved the city.
So no natural disasters during election campaigns, during budget negotiations, before Christmas, after Easter. Doesn't leave a lot of time for natural disasters. Do you have time for one more question? Okay. From the audience, please. Anyone? Yes, over here. Can we send a mic over there, please?
Thank you. I'm Ross Stein from the Global Earthquake Model Foundation, and this question is for Dr. Alip. I think, as the mayor said, it's so laudable that you're providing microinsurance to people against things like typhoons and earthquakes. And I'm wondering, how did you calculate the risk of the losses associated with that earthquake coverage, and do you need help in doing so?
In the first place, we're doing it also based on actuarial study. We have our own actuaries. We determine the age, we determine the possibilities and things like that. And therefore, we're able to come up with our own pricing. But the way to move forward, when we talk about other risks like crop insurance, agricultural insurance, there's still a lot of data that we will still be needing, and there will still be a lot of information that we'll be needing, and a lot of help from different countries, because the weather-based index, the climate change, these are things that we need for our data so that we can come up with a more sustainable pricing for our microinsurance, for agriculture, and also for the benefit that we're able to give. But let me just go through that, if I may be given
Sure,
another comment with the mayor. I really get so passionate when it comes to this resiliency setting up for the community. I think the most important, coming from the reality that we're now mentioning, I think it's important really for our grassroots, for the poor people, to come up with community insurance program. We have done this. Our Card Mutual Benefit Association, the MBA, is 100% owned by the members. And we're very cheap in terms of the premium pricing, and we're able to give the maximum benefit, and that's why we're able to do 135. It's no joke. If there's a demand, in one day we can give the benefit to the clients, and their question for documentation in 3 days, and with finality in 5 days. Many, from our experience, a number of our commercial insurance companies that I have experienced, they also do 135, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years before you get your payment. So these are the realities, and I think we need to keep on challenging this kind of standard. And if we really want to help, because politicians, we have great respect with you, Mayor, we have great respect with the scientists. Unfortunately, they keep on debating and debating, and the poor people in the community are the one facing the difficulty. That's why we're taking it on our own level, come up with our resiliency fund, the MBA, the Mutual Benefit Association. We're very lucky that in the Philippines, our insurance commissioner is very supportive on Mutual Benefit Association, the Mutual.
Aris, can I just have a follow-up there? Do you think that an agency, a government agency, could theoretically organize what you're organizing? Or are you saying that it can only be done on the grassroots NGO level? Because if it goes beyond that, it'll become too bureaucratic or too corrupt.
Forgive me to the representative of government here. When the government comes in, everything is a mess. Because people will always think, this is a grant, this is a charity. I think what the government needs to do, just like what in the Philippine context, the Mutual Benefit Association, they have allowed very conducive policy for us to perform and create and establish our own MBA. It took us several years for them to convince that this is the way to go, because it's something very new. But of course, we always need the support of government. We love government. They need to support us.
Do you love it or do you hate it? Come on.
We love them, but we hate them once they've become, they mess around with us when it comes to implementation. In fact, our Mutual Benefit Association, when we had this Typhoon Haiyan, we paid over $3 million right away to our clients. And we came up with $10 million for rehabilitation loan. And we never asked government. It is us. It's the community fund that was able to finance the activities and the insurance benefit of our clients. Isn't this what development is all about? Isn't this what resilience is all about? I think this is the way to go forward. Thank you very much.
Let's hand the microphone straight to Sir Edward. Sir Edward, I know you're dying to take this response. Government always makes a hash of it.
Well, I do accept that if you can keep these things at a much more local level, it is obviously going to be much better. I mean, bureaucracy by its very nature is slow. We do our best to be as swift and as reactive as we can be. But no, if you can get something like you've got going in the Philippines, that must be the right way. And I certainly think in London, if we have those opportunities of leaving it within small communities to deal with, that's an option we would always go for.
Let me ask Patricia something. I mean, in an era of social media, of digitalization, where most of us have mobile phones, where even the poorest parts of Africa are very well connected through mobile devices, and where the flow of information is extraordinary, is there any excuse for anyone at any level not to be informed as well as they should be?
Well, yes and no. I think that social media is important and we can use it. As government, we are now busy with designing an open data policy, where we hope through that policy we'll be able to communicate more effectively with our communities. No, there's no excuse. You also have the elected representatives that must also be informed, and they must also contact them, the community through town hall meetings or whatever. It is just that you must make sure that the information that you put out there is correct. And that it's information that people can use when they do need it. Thank you.
Okay, another question from the audience. Yes, please. Can we bring a mic out? We'll give you a mic.
I am the insurance commissioner of the Philippines, so this is the government
There we
speaking.
Go. Fantastic.
And I have with me members from our Minister of Finance with me.
Okay.
I just
you guys
would like
can meet
to,
later on as well. Yeah.
We know each other. He is my friend.
Thank
But
God
I
for
just
that.
would like to make it clear that we have laid down the legal framework for the MBAs in our country to operate viably and successfully. For instance, in terms of capitalization, their capital is much, much less than the regular or traditional insurers. The reason for that is we want to encourage the setting up of micro insurers to be able to provide services, financial products to the poor, which, as Dr. Alip and the distinguished mayor from Cape Town had stressed, that the poor bear the brunt of every calamity or disaster. That's true. We share that. For instance, some of the liberalizations which we have adopted to push for the promotion and development of the microinsurance in the country is, one, you can issue a policy, a very simple policy, no? Even in your own language, not in English, no? A one-pager is enough, no? We prescribe that claims should be settled within 10 days. So we admire CARD for adopting this 135 policy, no, which was actually put into practice. And I salute them for strictly enforcing that. But that is not, that is also true for other microinsurance providers, like Microinsure. I think there are representatives. No, it's one of the major brokers. And I admire the small players because they render services which are far better than the big commercial players.
So let me ask you a question. Would you have been promising your 10 days, still a bit longer than his 5 days, if it hadn't been for him and his 135 program? Did he put the heat on you?
Well, we definitely encourage practices which will exceed our target, no? So 135 is much better. Maybe I have to amend the 10-day and
might
lower
have to.
it.
That's why I love.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alip.
That's why I love my government. I love the insurance commissioner. Because they don't mess around with us. They've been very supportive with us, and we're happy that we are really exporting this mutual model to different parts of the country with the help of ICMIP.
Who would have thought we'd have an intra-Filipino insurance loving? My God. Okay, another question from the audience. Sorry? say that again, sorry. Final comments. Okay, right. I'm going to ask you all one quick question. Same question. I want you to basically give me a short answer, and then we're going to wrap it up. So we've had a very lively discussion. We could go on for hours and hours, and I'm sure you will be in the next few days in various workshops and other things. But if you were to, after the understanding that you've gained from personal experience, if you were to sum it up, in 20 seconds, what is the nub of the problem where we stand at the moment? Because we started this journey, as we heard at the very beginning of the conference. We started this a few years ago, understanding risk resilience, preparedness. What is the nub of the issue as we stand at the moment? Let's start with you.
Well, for me, it's about starting at the beginning, building social capital. And so that isn't waiting till the disaster happens. It's about building social capital from the outset. And if you think about it, I mean, in our country, the civil defence always say, make sure you've got 3 days worth of food and water and means of heating, to get you through those 3 days. And I said to the Director of Civil Defence recently, I said, don't you think that that's too individual a message? And maybe that's the problem. Maybe you should be asking your neighbourhood to have a week's worth of food and stuff ready so that the neighbourhood can get through a disaster. We plan for response, but we never plan for recovery.
Nice. Aris, quick one.
Well, from the point of view of microinsurance, I really will push the Resiliency Fund having this community microinsurance program that is managed by the very poor in the community, because it is us that will always suffer. It is us that will always face difficulty. We need the support of the government always to make the policy environment very effective for us.
Okay.
From the point of view of someone who's interested in science and scientific method, I think the name of the conference sums up our mission quite nicely. We should invest more in studying and understanding risk, and we should acknowledge that, at least in the climate case, and if it comes to local decision making, we just can't get rid of it. So we have to live with risk. Risk is here to stay, and rather than trying to get it away with ever more complex technological method, we should try to study it, to understand it, and communicate it very clearly to the policymakers. Okay. I think that's a message that came across from you very clearly, and so that's really what we should do.
All right, David.
I think once an issue has struck, it is about getting leadership to the community quickly and speedily and clearly. I think the trouble is in complex societies such as large cities, you've got so many competing people, all of whom have a finger in the pie, and all who want to lead, and I'm afraid it is down to the city authorities to actually get that settled quickly and speedily. And in fact, all the examples are that if you do that, you can mitigate an awful lot of the damage.
Patricia, you have a penultimate word.
Certainly, government can't do it alone. We do need the help and the partnership of the private sector and the communities. But what governments must get right is that when there is a disaster that strikes, and it's always the impact on our poorer communities, is that we need to be visible. We need to be seen to be with the communities at that particular point of time. And also, as governments around the world, I think we need to share more information about our responses to national disasters, but also how we then thereafter rebuild our communities. I think that will be a valuable lesson for all of us.
Thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end of this opening session. The panel has been absolutely spectacular. We fired up the debate. There's so much more to say. And I know you've all been wondering what that red splodge there is. That is not the aftermath of some hideous massacre. It is not a spilled tomato juice or a Bloody Mary. It is, in fact, the River Thames flowing into London. And London is that mould thing there at the end. Anyway, welcome to the city. Welcome to the conference. Thank you very much for taking part. And a big hand to our panel, please.